Hey friends, thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to take a plan off the internet and make a wooden project with it. Stay tuned. All right, folks, so the internet is full of all kinds of great things. One of those great things is the Family Handyman website, and it has plans to build different things. I would like to build a small stool, a multi-purpose stool that has a little handle in the middle of it. And so we're going to go ahead, we're going to take this plan that they provide, and we're going to walk through and build it. Now the internet's also full of not so great things or some maybe nonsense. Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. But the internet is full of fantastic things as well. So we're going to take one of those fantastic things and we're going to use it to make our wood project. All right, friends. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what we need for materials. So we can look on here what they provide for us. Cut all the parts from an 8-foot 1x6 and a 6-foot 1x12. All right, so that's what we need to do. First thing we need to do is figure out where we can get that at, what we're going to use for lumber. I'm going to go ahead and use some ash that we actually milled ourselves, and then I'm going to go ahead and plane it down so it's all 3/4 inch thickness, because that's what a 1x is. It's 3/4 inch thick material. So we'll go ahead and do that first. All right, friends, so we have our print here. I'm gonna go ahead and change some of these dimensions. This thing looks fantastic and it would work amazing, but for me, it's a little bit too long and a little bit too high. So I'm gonna shorten this so I only have 12 inches from the bottom of the foot to the top of the stool. So if I'm gonna have a 12 inch here, actually that's not gonna be 12 inches. It's gonna be 12 inches from this point to this point. The total overall height, I want 12 inches. Since this is 3/4 and this base is 3/4, that's 1 1/2 inches. I need to subtract that from this, which gives me 10 1/2. So this piece is 10 1/2 inches. So I need 2 of those 10 1/2 inches. They will have a 5-degree bevel on them. And I'm going to change this measurement to 24 inches. 36 is pretty long, but 24 is a lot easier to manage. And I'm actually going to change this measurement too. I'm going to make it whatever the width of my boards are here. All right, so we have our boards here. And it wanted to be 11 1/4, but I think I might change this to about 9 1/2 and just have a 1x10 instead of a 1x12. So we'll go ahead and use this stuff. I'm gonna cut 2 feet out of this and then we'll go from there. All right, so I have my top piece. I have this piece cut for here. I'm gonna go ahead and label these pieces A, B1, B2, C1, C2, and then I need D1, D2. So I have all these labeled. So now, just real light, I'm gonna just write an A on here, so I know what piece is what. So now I'm gonna go ahead and cut my legs and then my stringers. So they are 4 inches less. This piece is 4 inches less than this, so I need 2 pieces at 20 inches, and it looks like it's 4.5. I'm gonna use that measurement because that's a solid measurement for me. And then I'm going to cut these. Instead of 32, I'm gonna make them 20. All right, so I have a board here that I'm gonna use for my Bravo pieces. For these pieces right here, I'm gonna use this board. So as I said, they are 10.5. They're gonna be 10.5. I'm gonna go ahead and measure 10.5, and I'll cut that, and then I'll remeasure, because your saw kerf, if I just measured 10.5 and then 10.5, my kerf of my saw, or the width of your saw blade, is going to take out a little bit. So I could account for that, but I don't know what my saw kerf is right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure 10.5, make a cut, and then again, go ahead and I'm gonna pull again 10.5 and make another cut. Also, folks, there's a 5-degree bevel on this, so I'm gonna change my saw to match that 5-degree bevel so I don't have to cut it once. Okay, so I have my Bravos cut, and they have an angle on them. So now I'm going to save the cutoff. I'm gonna save my cutoff so I can make my Delta pieces with that same board that I used for my Bravos. So I'm gonna go ahead and make Bravo 1, Bravo 2. And so you might be asking, why in the world are you using that board that's all cracked? Well, I think it has a really nice character to this board. This board was came out of logs that we actually milled ourselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep that character in there and use it because I think it looks pretty cool. It's also not structural. Like, we're not framing a house with this. This is gonna be a little stool, so it'll provide a plenty amount of support for what we need to do. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna skip to Delta, skip to the little feet on this, since I already have this piece, and those look to be as wide. They look to be as wide as the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off, use that as my guide, and I'm gonna cut that, and then I'm gonna rip some pieces that are 2 inches wide for those feet. Okay, so I got my deltas, Delta 1, Delta 2, so I've got those. Now what is left is my Charlie pieces. They will be 20 inches long and 4.5 inches wide. So I think I have a board over here that I can cut 20 inches. Yeah, for sure. I got a board that I can cut 20 inches long and then get 2 strips that are 4.5 inches wide out of. All right, friends, so I know I said I was gonna leave the 4.5 measurement, but the board wasn't actually wide enough to get 2 pieces 4.5, so it ended up being 3.25, which I don't think it's gonna be that bad since we're shrinking everything else. So now we have to get to the more precise work. Now we are going to put this curve in on Bravo, this curve in on Charlie, and we're gonna put the handle in the middle, and we're going to round the delta pieces. All right, so let's go ahead and put the easy move. Let's put the handle in the very middle. So the first thing I need to do, looks like, to me, what they give us here is that they use a quarter for the radius, and it's 4.5 long. So what that tells me is this width, I would imagine that's about half of what this is. So I'm gonna make this dimension, I'm gonna make that 2.25. So I'm just gonna make a square and figure out where my points are, put a quarter on there, get my roundedness, and then make an arc for those. Looks like all I got, folks, is a nickel. We'll make it a nickel. Might as well shrink everything else. Okay, so now we're coming over here and over here. You might say, well, why in the world didn't you use a compass? Well, I am just gonna freehand this and see how it looks first. Well, it looks okay. I might actually shrink it down a hair. And I shrunk everything else, right? All right, so there's my handle. So now I'm gonna go ahead and drill that out, and so I can get a jab saw in there and cut it out. All right, folks, so I don't really like how my cut ended up here, so I'm gonna get a rounded file and do some file work on these ends. All right, friends, so now we have all of our pieces cut out, and the plans say to use a belt sander to smooth these up. I would rather use a file so I can make sure not to go too deep on stuff, and you probably can afford a file before you can afford a belt sander, so we're gonna use a file. All right, friend, so this lumber, like I said earlier, it has some interesting characteristics to it. This one has a split in it, and I know what you're saying. Why don't you use some good lumber? Well, I want to use this specific lumber for a specific reason, of which I will tell you at the end of the video. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and cut a channel in here and put a spline in there so that this will never continue to separate and break. So I'm gonna do that on the table saw. I'm going to rip a channel, and then I have this little 1/4" material that I used to make my arc. I'm gonna use that to put in my spline to keep it held together. All right, so I ripped that little groove in there. Once I get, look at that. It's a little bit too thick. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this little spline through the table saw and just take a little bit off it so it's nice and tight in that groove. Then I'll glue it in there, cut the remainder off, and glue it in there so it doesn't ever split. And that's called a spline. All right, so now after we've filed all of our edges and everything, we're ready to pre-drill. I've pre-drilled it. Now I'm going to countersink these holes so that the screws are flush. All right, now we are ready to join them together. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put just a little bit of glue on here. Set these in place, and then I'm gonna screw them in. All right, so we have the base done now. I want to now lay out how it's going to fit on the actual top of the stool, of the bench. So I'm gonna measure and make these sides the same, make the overhang the same here, and make this overhang the same here. Then I'm gonna trace it out, and I'll mark on this side and drill from this side, flip it over, countersink on the other side, and then I'll be able to fasten it, and I'll be 100% sure that this is right where it needs to be without drilling through the top of it and missing the actual base. All right, there we go, friends. This is how you can take a plan from the internet and you can change it to meet your specifications or what you want it to be. I'm pretty much done here. It's sturdy. I'm gonna go ahead and test it. I'm gonna go ahead and do a finish sanding on everything. All I've really done is just file everything, and I'm gonna finish sanding, but I know you don't wanna watch that. So I'll do that after the video. But the reason I wanted to use this lumber, the reason why, even with the crack and some of the holes, the reason I wanted to use this lumber is because this lumber was cut from a tree from my parents' farm, and this is going to be for my kids. So a little bit of sentimental value in that. The tree that came from the kids' grandparents will now be in their house and able for them to use for the life of this stool. So sometimes you use some stuff that's not as pretty as other stuff because of some sentimental value, or at least I do anyway. So hey, thanks so much for watching, folks. I really appreciate the view. Remember to work hard, because hard work is its own reward, and get a little creative sometimes, even if you're following a plan. Thanks for watching.